The Urban League of San Diego County is on the front line of education and youth development, empowering workforce, housing, and financial development. We provide community health and wellness opportunities and civil rights and civic engagement. Welcome to the Urban League Today with host Abdallah.
Welcome to the Urban League Today. My name is Abdallah, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Urban League of San Diego County. Today we will be covering the topic of gifted and talented education shrinking in San Diego County. Gifted education has been shrinking in San Diego and California. California provides no funding for gifted programs, while some district leaders question how equitable they are. Since its inception, the Urban League has held education as a primary pillar as the gateway to equality and inclusion. San Diego Unified School District's Gifted and Talented Education, or GATE, program, long imagined by parents and district leaders to be a model for school districts statewide, is shrinking. The district has been identifying fewer students for the gifted program each year since 2015. About 18% of age-eligible students are identified for the program this year, compared to 31% in 2012. District leaders have been vocal about their desire to decrease the number of gifted identified students. In 2015, the school board overhauled its gifted identification testing to decrease what officials suggested was an inflated number of students qualifying as gifted. The district identifies far fewer students as gifted in areas with more low-income Black and Latino students than in areas with more higher-income White and Asian students. The Urban League has invited a stellar group of educators to address several questions about learning. Joining our discussion are San Diego Unified School District Trustee Richard Barrera and California Student Aid Commissioner Debra Maxie. Welcome to our program. The first question will be for Richard. Richard, what is the difference between GATE, honors, and seminar?
So, yeah, and that's really, I think, the critical question. So GATE and seminar. GATE is a program that has existed for many decades in which students in second grade are required to test. And what's supposed to happen is, or traditionally what has supposed to happen is that students who test in the top 2% on the GATE test are enrolled in the GATE program. Seminar has always been a San Diego Unified specific program where students who test in the top 0.5% are supposed to then be enrolled in seminar. Honors is a distinction of the type or maybe the level of a course generally that's taken in high school. So in other words, a student, could be taking English as a 9th, 10th grader, it could be standard English, or could be honors English, or could be advanced placement English. So it's more a distinction of the level of a course that high school students take, whereas the gifted and seminar programs have traditionally been programs that students take a form of an aptitude test in second grade and then are placed into either the GATE or seminar program.
Thank you so much, Richard. Debra, next question for you. Who is eligible for these programs and how are they selected?
Not quite understanding this question. What do you mean, who is qualified for
in terms of the students?
For
the criteria for the programs of GATE, honors, and seminar.
Well, like Mr. Barrera said, it's through testing that's done, but it can also be by teacher selection. If a teacher deems that a student that they have in what's called just a regular class, that this student is above the level of what is going on in that classroom and would benefit by having a more rigorous curriculum, they can suggest and encourage that parent give permission to move them into a GATE class. And I speak from experience because I have two sons that went through San Diego Unified School District. They're now over 40 years old, but they started out in kinder, and they were I wanted an all-day kinder because I was working all day and so was my husband. And so there was one school that we did an inter-district transfer to, and they were in an all-day kinder. And then we wanted them to be placed in the GATE kinder class. And there was one school near us that was in Canto Elementary at that time. And our caregiver, our babysitter was near there. So I would take them, she would pick them up, and they were there all day. And they were placed in there because we had asked for it. And then they were tested later, and they both tested in the cluster level, but yet they were both placed in seminar because they had enough in one class. Like when you have your numbers in a class, you can't go over a certain number. They decided to ask if we would not mind if our kids went into the seminar class. Of course, we said, sure. Couldn't be much different than the cluster class. And that way they were with other students who were just as excited as they were to do hands-on projects and additional work. It does put a little bit more on a parent to make sure that those students stay on top of those lessons, especially at a young age. You can't expect them to come home and the teacher has given them a little bit more than what you might expect in kinder, first grade, second grade, and all the way through without your assistance. And so they can either test or they can be selected by the teacher, and once it's agreed upon, they can go in. And as long as they can handle that work, they're good.
And did your sons remain in seminar throughout high school?
Yes, they did. They only went to two schools. They went to Encanto because that was an atypical school. And then they went to Gomper Secondary. My younger son actually transferred over to Crawford High School in the 10th grade because things had kind of shifted at Gompers. But my older son only went to Encanto. From there, he started 7th grade and went 7 to 12 at Gompers. And yes, he was in the seminar program until he got into high school. Then he was in AP and honors courses there.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Richard, next question for you. Some have said these programs further segregate in the educational system and can stigmatize students. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, so I think the concern about programs like GATE and Seminar for years, and I came onto the board in 2008, and so I think a lot of these concerns predate my time on the board, but they've certainly been topics of discussion in the time that I've been on the board. So there are several issues, but I think at the core is that the idea of identifying and labeling students, especially so early, as early as second grade, is based on a system that comes from decades ago, where a lot of people thought the basic purpose of school was to classify students as either being college material or going straight into the workforce. And that idea of taking a small group of students and classifying them as gifted, and then basically saying all other students fall into a lesser category, is something that I've certainly been concerned about in my entire time on the board. And I think what that tends to do is limit opportunities for all of our students. And I think we're long past being in a world where only some students need to go on to higher education. I think higher education is important for all of our students. And in particular, GATE testing has very much traditionally shown to discriminate against students of color, students who are coming from immigrant backgrounds. Like most standardized testing, the testing tends to favor certain groups of students over others. And I think just the notion of some sort of raw, quote unquote, intelligence test that you give to a second grader is a concept that never made sense, but is certainly long overdue. And so what we're trying to get at is expand opportunities and expand rigor for all of our students. We're certainly not about reducing rigor and reducing opportunity for students who might have traditionally, qualified for GATE and seminar, but we are saying that every student has enormous potential, and the job of a school system is to help students reach their potential and not use these sort of arbitrary methods like, intelligence testing of second graders to separate students from each other and classify them. And I think that's never been good for most students in the school system. And I think it has definitely had discriminatory effects on students of color and students from high poverty backgrounds.
Do you think it would be different if the testing began in middle school?
Well, I think the concept of a raw intelligence test is always going to be flawed. And I think any type, frankly, of standardized tests, the research is traditionally, it's why you see more and more universities, for instance, taking the SAT out of their admission criteria, because those tests just have a long history of being biased. And I don't think you can just take a kid at a certain point in their life and say, this is who you are. And we're going to define how much potential you have. I think the job of a school system is to continue to open up opportunities so that students can realize potential. I think, what Debra just talked about, for instance, of teachers having more ability to identify the strengths of their students and to put their students into positions that they can be challenged, I've always thought makes a lot more sense than applying some sort of, raw intelligence test that I could just think by its nature is discriminatory.
Thank you, Richard. Debra, in your experience, does every school offer these type of programs?
Well, I've been out of the district for the past now 6 years, but I believe a lot of the schools offer GATE or advanced classes. I know at the high school level they do, because they're preparing them for that next step into college. Elementary and middle schools, I believe it varies by campus and population, of course. I think it is a good thing. I know we talk about segregation and discrimination against certain people, but I know that when the testing is not the right thing, like an absolute test that has been mentioned, there's always been a way to test for GATE that did not mean answering questions. They went on a student's artistic ability, because students can be gifted in many ways. And that has always existed, because as I remember talking with other parents, and they go, and some people wanted to talk numbers. Well, how high did your kid score? I don't even didn't remember at the time. I just knew that my sons were going to do well in school because of who I was and who their father was, period. And other parents were saying, well, my son or daughter, they tested because they are really gifted in art or gifted in music, My kids didn't get either one of those skills, but they were very receptive to working very hard and learning new things. And of course, the experiences that their dad and I gave them added to their educational opportunities. And I do know that not all students have that. And that's unfortunate. It's been unfortunate, and I don't know if that will ever equal out. We're trying to balance it out, and that's why we're trying to spread what I call the wealth around, not throwing it all out. You know, I don't believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Let's not get rid of this rigor and all. But I also question, if we take away that title, will whoever is in front of these students take away the rigor? Because teachers, they're human. Mm-hmm. They know that they're teaching seminar or cluster. They know that they have to step it up. They're certified. There's another certification for teachers who teach that, or should be, they should be certified that teach that. And because of that, they are willing to put in that extra work. Not only are the students doing extra work, but the teacher is also doing extra, because they go beyond just what's in now on the computer. It used to be the textbook, but now it's on the computer with all of these programs. Mm-hmm. And students dig deeper. They do it earlier in their educational journey, as opposed to being shocked when they get to college and they have to do more digging and more research and explaining more in a paper, doing more than 4 paragraphs makes your paper. No, they are ready for it because they have experienced it over time. And so I really, I don't say don't get rid of it. It's the rigor that I'm most concerned about. The title, like commissioner, it's not a paid position. It is a position that I hold dear to my heart, because it's something that this particular commission that I serve on is something that I did for most of my career. And so that's why I serve on this commission. But the title, I'm still Debra Maxie. So I could still be Debra Maxie if I'm in seminar, cluster, honors, regular class. But I need to shoot for the stars. I need to be at the top of wherever I am. And that's the whole goal of public education, is to take the kids where they are and move them as far as we can in the short amount of time that we have. And that's the beauty of what I selected as my career.
Wonderful answer, Debra. Thank you so much. It's a great segue. You kind of spoke to the teachers and their certifications, and Richard, if you could speak a little more to this. Are teachers required to obtain a specific certification for gifted or seminar instruction?
Well, so again, I think this goes to, and I'm agreeing with the points that Debra is making. I think this goes to, are we challenging all of our students? And especially, are we tapping into the gifts of our students? And, like Debra said, every student is different, and being gifted can mean a lot of different things, to different students. So the GATE program, for instance, has been very unevenly applied in our district. And today it continues to be unevenly applied. There was a time that what GATE meant was you were actually pulling students who qualified for GATE or seminar out of their regular classrooms and into a special classroom. And a teacher had a curriculum that was specifically intended, for those students. And often, going back more than a decade, those students in the GATE or seminar program had additional support. So they had lower class sizes. They were given more access to arts and music and other, types of activities than students in the normal classrooms. And I think that, the general experience of students and parents who went through GATE and seminar was positive, certainly. The question for us, and this is exactly the right question I think Debra is asking, is a teacher needs to be able to work with every student in their classroom. And so if you have, 26, 27 students in a fourth grade classroom, especially in San Diego Unified, the kids in that classroom are coming from many different backgrounds and experiences and are entering that teacher's classroom at the beginning of the school year at different levels of competence in, English, math, but also things like science and arts and music. And so what we expect out of an elementary school teacher today is that you as a teacher need to have the ability to understand where each of your kids are, connect with each of your kids, and provide a curriculum and a program that does challenge and does establish a high degree of rigor for each of your students. And that's easier said than done. And I understand that. But if we really want to take on what I think is the mission of public education, and that is to help prepare every student in our schools to succeed, we have to have teachers who are prepared to work with every student. And I think when you continue to segregate students, and it's not just about GATE or seminar, it could be English learners are pulled out of a classroom, or students with special needs are pulled out of a classroom. And when you start to pull apart a classroom like that, what you're doing is you're saying to a teacher, we don't expect you to be able to work with all of your students. There are specialists, to work with different groups of students. And the problem with that is there will never be enough specialists to go around to provide that level of support for kids. And so it's really about the ongoing work and professional development with teachers so that they can work with every kid in their classroom, rather than thinking that we somehow have a system that we can pull kids apart and meet their needs separately.
Richard, do you think that teachers having certain certifications and others not having those, does that cause a separation, if you would say, a pecking order within the school district?
I think that's certainly been true in the past. But again, it comes back to when we say certification. So if you have an elementary school teacher, what do we want that teacher to be able to do? And like I said, it's to be able to work with every kid in your class and to be able to work with kids at the pace that they're ready for. And so, these sort of special certifications, again, I don't know that they've really ever meant anything, in the district. I think there's always certainly been, if you think about high school, you think about going back to, when many of us were in high school, I think there was a practice of high achieving kids, being put into AP or honors classes and having certain teachers teach those kids. And there probably was, this idea that if you were a teacher and you were there for a while, you earned the right to work with the highest achieving kids. And that meant the kids who weren't as high achieving, might have gotten, teachers who weren't as experienced or weren't as strong. So all of that, I think is coming from school systems that were based on, what people thought was the right thing in, the 50s and 60s and 70s. And I think where we believe we need to be today is recognizing that even though kids are at various levels and have various interests and various gifts and various needs in a classroom, we have to be able to work with all of those kids and help each of them reach their potential.
Thank you, Richard. Debra, how do gifted programs address the achievement gap?
Addressing the achievement gap. Well, we know that this gap has existed since the beginning of time, because everyone starts school at a different level. It's already been mentioned. A kindergartner Some can tie their shoe. Some don't even know how to put the shoe on the foot, let alone get it tied. And so the gap starts there, which is how we instituted TK, which I thought was like tea time or something. I was like, what is TK? But that's to get them ready for when they have to go to school, to get them a little bit more prepared. And that was another gap, because some people could afford to send their kids to preschool and others could not. So we start the gap early. And addressing this gap, to me, still comes from, like was mentioned, you have to match a teacher with the students. I don't know how many lesson plans we expect a teacher in door number 1 to have to prepare to meet all of the students that come into door number 1. They are at so many different levels. So if you have those that are labeled special needs, that's one group you have to deal with. May take a little bit more time to get them on their device. It may take a little bit more, a different voice level to get them to engage. Well, while the teacher is doing that, I'm over here. I don't have those special needs. So what am I doing? Am I now starting to thump on the desk because I'm bored? I'm already on the computer. I don't need the extra help. There's that gap. So he or she has to work with the special needs student. I'm the average student. And then there's, of course, the advanced student. And let us not forget the student who is still learning English as another language. And I say another language, not as a second, because for some of these students, it's a third or fourth or a fifth language, and even the young ones. So we have to, you separate, or you try to get assistance. And I know aides were taken out of the class, when budgets are cut and things adjust and shift. We lose some of that support that we had. You don't want to segregate students where it used to be special ed kids never went into a classroom. So instead of taking them out of the room, they push them in the room, which is good, because many of them need to be there. They should be there. But they do need to have special attention, which might mean another body, because that teacher may have 4 or 5 or 6 in the same class. And that takes away from them working with the other students who are waiting for their attention also. So this gap, it's hard to say, how do we address it? We're doing what we can. I know that we can do, maybe shift a little bit. And one thing that I must say about the pandemic, the shift of giving every student a laptop was a plus for those who cannot afford their own. And for many brown and black kids, they could not afford a laptop. And when they came home, when schools started using those more and more, and the district just had thousands and thousands of these, that was a plus. But then we ran into the issue of the internet. Right. When the computer wasn't working for whatever reason, getting that computer to one of the places to get it replaced, the district had them set up, but it wasn't always a place where all of the families could get to, because what's good for one is not good for the other. And it wasn't like they had to all go north to get them replaced, but even getting in what I call south of 8. For some people, it's difficult. Buses don't go every place. Where the trolley is, because their little tracks are on the ground. They don't go near the school. You have young kids who can't go and replace their laptop. They accidentally dropped it. Mom has to go get it. Dad has to go get it, but they have a job. They can't go. Or if they go, they have to take the other siblings with them because they're too young to stay at home. So it ran into a lot of problems, but that helped in the gap of having the devices for all students. But then we ran into a bit of a glitch with the internet, because not everyone, even though hotspots were given, it might depend on your location if the hotspot worked. There's always something, but that was one way of closing that gap, that everyone got it, not just those who could afford it, And we have a tremendous amount of work to do to close this gap. But in closing it, I certainly don't want the top end student to have to hold their horses waiting on someone else to catch up to them. That's not what I see as closing the gap.
Great answer, Debra. Great answer. Richard, the state used to provide funding for gifted education until 2014, when the state switched to the local control funding formula. What is the local control funding formula?
So the local control funding formula essentially says that it's up to school districts to make decisions on how to best address the needs of their students, given that the needs from district to district can be very different. But the other thing that the local control funding formula did is it said districts with a higher percentage of students who, for instance, qualify for free and reduced lunch, or are English learners, or are in the foster system, should get a higher amount of funding, dollar per pupil, than districts that don't have as many kids who are challenged. So it did two things. It kind of redistributed the pot so that districts with a high number of students in need got more. But then it did take away a lot of those restrictions on districts about how to spend the money. And it essentially said the state is going to hold school districts accountable really to this core issue that you're identifying of closing the achievement gap. It's going to look at progress on graduation rates. It's going to look at progress on college readiness. It's going to look at a number of factors, and it's going to the state's going to hold districts accountable to achieving outcomes, but the state is going to be less restrictive in telling districts what you need to do to meet the needs of your students. So that, so you're right, something like specific funding for GATE was something that existed pre-local control funding formula. And then with local control funding formula, it's now up to districts whether they decide to take some of their money and say, we're going to spend it on kids that we say are qualified as GATE, versus, maybe other things that you would want to do with that money.
So that, giving the autonomy back to local districts, that you see that as a plus, as opposed to a minus.
I think it's critical, and a lot of this comes down to kind of technical and operational issues, but part of the problem is if you say that only certain students qualify for certain sources of funding, what that does is incentivizes districts to identify students as being part of that group that can qualify for that funding. And I think it does lead to, what I was talking about is, I think one of our big problems is it tends to, we're going to pull a student out for these special services from their regular classroom and separate them from other students during the day in order to qualify, for this special pot of funding. It also creates a tremendous amount of paperwork for districts to document how they're spending certain money on certain students. So I think it certainly makes sense to give districts more discretion, but then to hold districts accountable to actually closing the achievement gap. I will say that we have a couple of very positive examples in our district over the past decade where the achievement gap has closed significantly. For instance, students graduating having met all of the requirements to enter the Cal State University or the University of California, that achievement gap has significantly narrowed. So in 2009, we instituted a policy called A to G for all. A to G is the course sequence to qualify for UC and CSU. And at that time, I would tell you, a lot of people said, "Oh, you can't do that. We've got too many students who aren't ready, who can't hack it. Can't hack that level of rigor." Well, At that moment, 2009, about 45% of our students were graduating having met the UC A to G requirements. Today, that number is closer to 75% across all students in the district, so 45% to 75%. But among Latino students and African American students, that number back in 2009 was about 25% of Latino and 25% of African American students were graduating having met those A to G requirements. Today, those numbers are up around 70% for both Latino and African American students, because when we said as a system, we're going to raise the bar for all students, what that also meant for us as a system was, if you were a student at Hoover High School or Lincoln High School, you might not have had access to A to G classes. In other words, they might not have even been offered, or certainly the full range of those courses might not have been offered at your school. And often a student would get to their senior year, be ready to apply for college, and their counselor would tell them, sorry, you're not eligible. And by the way, we never even offered, those courses. So when we said the A to G requirement is going to become the graduation requirement across the board, what that meant is we had to go in to each of our schools, and we had to make sure that all of our schools offered all of the A to G courses that students, would need to take to graduate and to be eligible. And that's had a significant narrowing of the achievement gap. And again, I think that's something that I think our district has generally done a good job taking advantage of the discretion provided under the local control funding formula and the additional resources that our district gets, because we've got a higher percentage of students, who are struggling. And I think we've done things like really revamped, courses being offered to students in high school and supports for students taking those A to G courses. And I think the result has been a significant narrowing of the achievement gap on that measure. Again, students graduating high school eligible to enter the UC or CSU system. We've got a lot of other measures that the gap hasn't narrowed a lot, but that is one significant example that, frankly, progress had not been made for decades and decades and decades before 2009, when we had all of these, sort of specialized, funding sources in place. And when we made that decision that it's going to become the default graduation requirement, we've seen, progress that has, in 10 years has certainly outpaced any progress that we saw in the 50 years before that on that measure of, students being ready to apply for college.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Thank you. Debra, some argue that without GATE programs, some students are not challenged and may become bored. What would you say to that?
Absolutely. And like I said, it's not really the title. It could be a regular class with a very enthusiastic teacher who challenges all of the students before that teacher. And they would not be bored. And then their third period class, they go to the next door and they're bored out of their mind, because that is not an enthusiastic teacher. It's not the title. It is the person before them. And certification helps, like when I say certification, it's some additional training. Like your AVID teachers, because there is a format for AVID, they have to know what that format is and what they expect of every student in AVID. So if you go to a school that has 1 or 2 AVID classes, those students are all marching to the same drummer. If you go to a school that is a total AVID school, all of those teachers have been certified in AVID training, so they all have the same mindset as to the additional things that they're going to do. They're going to teach their subject, but this is also what we're going to do. They're going to take notes a certain way. The Cornell notes, you have to fold the paper, you have to do this, you got to, and they get in groups and they teach the kids those kinds of steps. It's as powerful as being in a seminar class where you sit in a circle and you have full discussions and you have to bring your note cards and your Post-its and all of that. It's just as powerful. So it's really the person before them that makes the rigor. And so although the title can be taken away, but it is, students, especially at the high school level where they have a few choices, not a lot of choices sometimes, but based on scheduling, but they can go in and advocate for themselves. I want to take this class versus this class, this subject versus this subject. They know where they would do best. And part of it is personality. They know the teachers and they don't do well with one teacher for whatever reason. And so they would prefer someone else. Not so much in the middle school, and of course not in elementary do they have that, but sometimes there are changes that are made at those levels based on how those students are progressing or not progressing, or really interacting with the teachers. That's why there are buddy systems with teachers, so that if Debra isn't doing well in Miss Jones's class, well, Miss Brown next door might do a better job with Debra today because of, I don't know, something's bothering Debra, and so she works okay over in this other room. So there are a lot of ways the school district has been allowed it, and it's case by case, school by school, to really work with their population. And that's one of the glories of having that freedom on your campus. If you have a really solid, what I call a solid faculty that is willing to work together, and you don't want one person to feel like they're being dumped on. But some people just work better with the students that are the challenging students. I don't call them bad students; they're just challenging students, and the students might not be a challenge to them, but it seems like, send them to her. I know as a counselor, people used to say, you don't want to go see, I was Miss Brown then. You don't go see Miss Brown. You don't go see Miss Brown. And all of the students that I had that were the challenging students that were sent to me, we are friends today, because I discipline them with love. And it's the same thing. You teach them with love. And if they don't get it right, don't embarrass them, work with them and say, what were you thinking when you did this? Because this is what I really needed from you, and work with them, because no one wants to be fronted, especially as they get older. Middle school, they're already dealing with their hormones and their brain hasn't quite caught up with that. And so, you really have to massage it and work with them and work with the families too. I do not want to leave out the families, because every family sends us the best that they have. They don't keep the good ones at home and send us the rotten children. They send what they have. And so when they send them to us, we have to work with them. And you accept the parents for whatever they're bringing to us. Sometimes they come a little bit heated, and that's okay. You let them vent, and then you can have your discussion. You don't try to go toe for toe, tit for tat. No, these are their children, and we are there to serve them. If they take their children out of public school, then next year they may not need Debra as in the classroom because the numbers have dropped. So for job security, teachers need to understand that they have to work with students and their families, and let them know, can you, you ask them, can you work a little bit more on this particular item? Because this is where I am finding that they are just not getting it here, but I'm going to give them a little more time. We always have deadlines and things. And some people kind of frown on if you extend the deadline, how that's going to skew the numbers. Some people just need a little more time to do some things. And so give them that grace, not all the time, not every day, but, at some point. That's showing that you're willing to work with them. And then I believe that they will come around. I've had many examples over my, I did 44 years of teaching before I retired. Mm-hmm. And I haven't really not worked since I retired. People wonder, am I retired or not? I said, yes, I officially turned in my paperwork. So I don't go every day any place, but there are times when I have taken long-term, like 2 or 3 months at a particular location, and worked with students and really got to know the families and all of that. And closing this gap is a hard one. And I think it'll always be a gap because you'll always have people coming into our district starting at a lower level than everyone else. You'll have those coming in that are just super duper. And you go, oh my goodness, where did they come from? We should clone some more. But still, it's there. And it really leans more towards the staff, as well as going back to the local control funding formula, holding whatever you put on the paper. You must be accountable for what you put down on that form. It's not just a form that principals have to, grovel over and get turned in. Who looks at that form? Who's holding them accountable for the monies that they do spend and how they spend it? Is it really the best way for their campus? And I know there are site councils where parents serve on and students are on those. Some are more active and more engaging than on other campuses, but it's really holding the schools accountable. Your neighborhood school, you don't have to travel on buses forever to get a good education. You should be able to walk to your school or take your own transportation to your school, but the school that is closest to you should be just as dynamite as the school that is further away from you.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree. Thank you so much, Debra. Last question, and either one of you or both of you can answer. There was a concern that the pandemic affected testing of potential gifted students. Is that truly a concern?
Well, I'll jump in first, and I just want to say that just listening to Debra, it just reinforces what I think is the right way for school districts to make decisions, which is you always listen to the people who are closest to the kids. You listen to the people who are in the classrooms, who are making a difference. And the way that Debra describes her ability to work with kids, including kids who, others might have, kind of written off or saying that they're too hard to work with, but Debra works with them and is, still is still close to them to this day. We have, incredible teachers, educators, counselors, principals, people in our district who know how to work with kids, who have been doing the work of actually helping kids overcome all of these challenges that they come into school with for years. And the more that we listen to educators, who are in there, doing the job, making this happen for kids, I think the wiser the decisions, will be that we'll make. And in terms of, again, gate testing, again, my view on this is gate testing itself is a very outmoded, idea. And again, I think it goes back to this notion that there are some kids who have natural intelligence and they should be put on a track to go to college. And then all the other kids, they can go to work, at the grocery store or in the factory or whatever. And that was, that's the way people thought about public education, for decades. And I think that always had bad effects, on, kids, again, who came into the system with more challenges. And so, how to do gate testing, that's a much less interesting and I think relevant issue than how do we help support and train teachers in a what will always be very diverse and challenging classrooms to be able to do, what Debra has done. And how do we, frankly, when we do professional development for teachers, I always think it's important, let's get some experienced teachers to conduct the professional development. And that usually doesn't mean let's pull all the teachers out of a school and go downtown to some sort of professional development. It usually means how do we take advantage of the fact that we've got strong, experienced teachers in all of our schools and put those teachers in a position that they can support and help train other teachers side by side. I think that's the way. And frankly, I think that, research has shown consistently that it's that type of effective teaching that makes the difference in closing achievement gaps. And the more that we do that, the more success we're going to have for our kids across the board.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard.
Yes.
Deborah, closing comments?
Yeah, I agree with that. That if we had the ability to take a group of teachers who on their own decided, let's go teach at the Blue School, and we need an English teacher, a history teacher, a math teacher, you select all the staff, and they agreed that they're going to take whatever student comes through that door, and you ask schools, okay, this Blue School is going to open over here. All of you have a choice of sending us X amount of students. I bet that school that is sending the students will send you their most challenged. They are going to get rid of whoever they can. Like, oh, this is our opportunity. But when they get to this other school, to Blue School, I bet those teachers who have decided that they're going to teach and they're going to work with whoever comes through the door, they will make a difference in those kids' lives. They will figure it out. They will help each other. Some will be more challenging than others. And no one is at 100% anyway. So there may be some that, don't conform and go along with the program, but I bet 99% of them would, because it might be the first time that they felt that they were wanted and that they got the help that they really needed. And it wasn't an embarrassing situation. You talk about research showing things in education. One thing I know for sure, history shows that money does not educate people. Money has been in the field of education forever. We were educated when we didn't have money. We were educated when we had a little bit of money, and we're still doing the same kind of education with a lot of money. We have a lot of money pouring into education these days. And if we take the money out of it, we can still educate if we really, really want to do that. And that means working with all of our students. All means all. Some people see all as being inclusive and others start picking. All means these except for these students. No, all means all. It's a 3-letter word. It's not hard to comprehend.
Spoken like a true educator, Debra. Thank you so much. That concludes our podcast today. I would like to thank both of you for giving us your time and your expertise in sharing this incredible information with our viewing and listening audience. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for
Thank you
inviting
so
me.
much. Yes.
Bye-bye.